Good afternoon to California Democrats. How is everyone? Yes? I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm going to answer some questions at the end of my comments. So I hope we can have a conversation. But I thought I'd share a little bit about what we've been doing in the Attorney General's office. As John said, because in large part I think what we've been doing here is really emblematic of what we do as a state and who we are as a state. I think I've shared with some of you, I will remember always the first time I walked into my first meeting of the National Association of Attorneys General, NAG. I said to a number of them, didn't they think that through? But there you are, it's called NAG. And I walked into the first meeting, my first NAG meeting, and it was very clear to me what we all know, which is that old adage is still very true. So goes California, goes the rest of the country. It was very clear to me, being in that room, that people around this country look to us, they look at us for what innovation looks like. They look at us and to us to show us the way in terms of what change looks like, in terms of improving the condition of people and aspiring to do everything that is about essentially being patriotic, which is fighting for the ideals of our country. And so when I stand there in those rooms representing California, I am of course there as one of us in this room, standing there representing the good work that everyone here does every day as leaders of our party. And so I want to start my comments by just saying thank you to all of you, because standing in those rooms, and I'm sure Dave Jones, Tom Phillips, and a number of us can say the same thing. When we stand in those rooms, we know that they often will thank us for what we're doing with California Democrats. And they'll look at each one of us because we're the public face of the party, but it is the work that all of you are doing. And when they thank us, they are thanking you for the work you do every day. So John talked a little bit about the situation that we've had with the financial institutions in the United States. And I actually was talking with some folks outside of this room about that fight. So many of you know I came in office as Attorney General January 22nd, and we just started at that point in California and the 49 other states started a discussion with the 5 big banks of the United States. And the discussion was about what should happen as a result of an investigation which found that the 5 big banks of the United States had engaged in misconduct called robo-signing. Basically, they were rubber stamping foreclosures in our state and around the country. And it was a particular concern, of course, for us as Californians, because over the course of those few years, California had 7, if not 8, of the top 10 cities in the United States hardest hit by the foreclosure crisis. And as a matter of fact, what we did is early on, I took my team, I said we're going to travel the state and meet with those homeowners. We didn't take press or anything like that, but just to go and sit down with hardworking folks in places like Fresno and Stockton and Los Banos and Loyal Heights, and talk with them about the experience they have being individuals who are aspiring to achieve the American dream, people who are hardworking people who I would, end up talking to the banks about and saying, let me tell you, don't talk about these people as trying to steal from your banks, which is what one banker told me. These are the folks I grew up with. And I would look at them and I'd say, have you ever known someone who was proud of their lawn? This is who we're talking about, hardworking folks. So we got in a discussion with the 5 big banks, and it was interesting. I've told this story a couple times, but my lawyers were meeting with their lawyers. And, we all know that a lot of this stuff, it gets to a very base level. So what ended up happening, their lawyers said to our lawyers, well, we want to meet with her. Because, we were new to the scene. No one knew it. They didn't want to size you up. So her flew out to D.C. and had a meeting with basically the CEOs and the general counsel of the 5 biggest banks in the United States. And it was a very interesting meeting because it became clear to me during the course of that conversation that their bottom line, unapologetically, was about their shareholders. And our bottom line, of course, was about our shareholders, who are the homeowners of California. So during the course of that conversation, it became clear to me we were not going to have a meeting of the minds. And in particular because they were offering California $2 to $4 billion and suggested that's a lot of money and we should take it. But doing the work that we do, the way we do it as Californians, we had hired economists to go to the 58 counties of California, and I said, tell me exactly what our numbers look like in each of the 58 counties in terms of who is underwater and by how much. And so that information told us we had 2.2 million foreclosure or homes that were underwater. 2.2. So what we ended up doing is saying, no, thank you, that's crumbs on the table, and we walked out. And it's funny, I've talked with a lot of our friends, who are our labor leaders, and I said, you know, I for the first time have fully understood what your experience must be like. You know, I've been there, I'm empathetic, I'm with you, but I fully understood. Because as you all may recall, pulling California out of that negotiation was not necessarily a popular thing to do. And in particular, because as many of you know, when you make that kind of decision, it is not something that can be made lightheartedly. In that situation, we were looking at the fact that the reality is that they were putting some money on the table. And there were homeowners who at that time, in real time, were holding on by their fingernails, trying to stay in their homes. So it was a matter of walking away from what could have helped some people, but knowing that it did not represent a fair deal. Long story short, with the support of this party, with the support of labor, with the support of hardworking folks, with the support of the electeds in this room, we were able to negotiate a final deal that instead of $2 to $4 billion was $20 billion for the state of California. The next step was realizing that the settlement, and this was not widely known, represented basically a 3-year deal, meaning there were certain reforms that were part of that settlement that only had to be in place for 3 years. So when we came back, we said, no, we want to make this real and we want to make it permanent. So what we did is we wrote, together with the leaders in our legislature, and I want to thank everyone who was here for the help that they gave and the support that they gave, we together wrote a package of bills that we called the Homeowner Bill of Rights. And it was an interesting situation, because then there we were in Sacramento just whistling a happy tune, so sure that everyone would see the importance of this and would agree that it's just about a sensible approach, would agree that the fact of dual tracking was just not a fair process where a homeowner was in the process, one track of trying to refinance their home, modify their loan, and paying the modified payment, and then another parallel track without notice to that homeowner foreclosed upon them. It was just not fair. We thought that the bill that would correct an end dual tracking, of course it's reasonable and everyone would agree. There was a bill as part of the Homeowner Bill of Rights that would do the work of saying, you know what, up and down the state, we know the stories of the homeowner who would pick up the phone and call the bank to talk with someone about their situation, and if they got a human being, which was not often, that human being was unfamiliar with their case. So then the homeowner, and this is where we always pay attention to the detail of what is the condition of the people we represent, that homeowner would have to gather up 50 pages of documents, go down to the Kinko's or somewhere else and fax those pages one at a time, and then they called the bank the next time if they got a human being, that person was unfamiliar with their case and said they didn't have the documents. Up and down the state we heard that story. So one of the bills that we proposed required that the lending institution at the banks would appoint a single point of contact for that homeowner. Seems fair and reasonable. Well, what we heard when we got up there is, oh, this has been tried before, and it is dead on arrival. That's what they told us. This is dead on arrival. There are lobbyists, powerful lobbyists, who will kill this. And so we said, okay, and with the help of everyone in this room, we decided let's just take it to the streets. And we had cards that we were handing out, and we had petitions, and we took it to the people. And we reminded some of the folks in Sacramento who needed reminding that it is in their best interest to vote in the best interest of their constituents.
Yeah.
And so, after a period of time of doing that work together, we were able to pass what has been described as a historic bill that is a model for other states, which is the California Homeowner Bill of Rights. We could not have done that without doing that together. Following on that, one of the issues in the negotiation process with the banks had been that they wanted us, as part of the deal of getting the money, to give up uninvestigated claims. And again, this was another matter where I was looking across the table at these people were like, are you crazy? Do you know I'm a prosecutor? I don't give up uninvestigated claims. I have personally prosecuted everything from low-level offenses to homicides. I don't do that. So, why? Because as it turned out, and as you all know, we wanted the ability, which we fought for and kept, to do things like sue S&P, which as a rating agency was inflating the value of investments that we as a state were investing in, both in terms of private investors and of course public investors. And who has the biggest public investor in the country? We do, and it's called CalPERS. And it is a fund that is supposed to support the hard-working men and women of the state. So we are currently engaged in litigation in that matter, and in fact they tried for a second appeal to get the case dismissed against them, because they said, well, you know, what she's trying to do is violate free speech. Because they decided that all of a sudden now they're going to say that their ratings were just their opinions, an expression of their opinions, and therefore their free speech would be violated by penalizing them for absolutely committing misrepresentation. So we survived that, that case goes on. And then most recently, as John Burton mentioned, we announced last week a settlement with JP Chase, which will bring California $300 million. And that was an example of JP Chase doing the work of basically misrepresenting the residential mortgage-backed securities that were sold to CalPERS. And remember, that whole mortgage-backed securities deal is very interesting. What they created was basically this financial instrument where they would bundle mortgages and then sell them to investors with some implicit, if not explicit, representation that when you as the investor buy these, we've done the due diligence to know that the homeowners who own it will pay you off in 15 to 30 years. So when you buy it, you think you're going to get a payoff at the end of it. But we know the due diligence had not been done, so that was a misrepresentation to those investors. Again, private investors and public investors, CalPERS being the victim there. So essentially what we did with this group of cases is what we do every day, all of us, in the fight that we continue to wage, which is say that working men and women deserve to have a voice, they deserve to be given protection, they deserve to be able to aspire to live the American dream knowing that they will have dignity in the process and that the system will be fair to them. And that when they are motivated by doing the right thing, others cannot be predatory in taking advantage of that approach by doing misrepresentations in a way that allows them to personally profit. Some of the other work that we did, of course, this last year was the Prop 8 case. And again, we all did that together. I thank and applaud Jerry Brown for a number of things, but as Attorney General for his position on Prop 8. And then, of course, as you know, in our election and in my election, that was one of the divisive issues. My opponent for Attorney General in the general election said he would defend Prop 8. We said we would not, and of course we won. So, because we did that, California Democratic Party had the confidence then going into the next stage of the battle that started back up in 2011 and continued until just this past summer, to say, no, the people of the state of California do not want this unconstitutional law to be defended. And those people who are taking it to the Supreme Court do not have standing. The people have spoken, and of course, the people won. And we have initiated the first same-sex marriages in California now and forever. Another area that we have been working on, and we made an announcement last week, is on something that has challenged us for decades. And it's the revolving door of our criminal justice system. We have talked about it for years, all of us together. We have been working on it for years. So last week I was proud to announce a new division of the California Department of Justice, which is called the Division on Recidivism Reduction and Reentry. And what we're doing in this division is we are, and it's one of the only of the State Department of Justice in the country. What we are doing is we are going to support local counties in doing everything that AB 109 requires them to do, everything that good public policy demands they do, which is look at how we can return former offenders into our communities in a way that we will reduce the likelihood that they will reoffend. And why? Because that's just about being smart on crime. It's about recognizing that for too long we have presented a false choice about criminal justice policy, which suggests that you're either tough on crime or soft on crime. And instead we need to be smart on crime. So what we will be doing now is supporting the counties, the 58 counties, and I strongly believe county government is where it's at. You know, I know us as state leaders, we believe the state leadership is where it's at, but the counties are so powerful, in particular on this issue. Because reentry, in order for it to be effective, and I know this based on the work we did when I was district attorney of San Francisco, when we created an initiative called Back on Track, which was designated by the United States Department of Justice as a model for the country. What I know to be true is that around county government, the beauty of that model is that then you have the county superior court. You have the county Department of Public Health, right? You have social services. You have the Department of Child Support, something John Burton took out of the DA's offices years ago. It is the I remember.
What's the name?
I know, I'm cool with you. And so what we have then around the county government structure is all that we need, including the county labor, including what we need to do around county size chambers of commerce. What we can do is gather all those folks together to focus on these returning former offenders. Remember, AB 109 targets the low-level offenders. And do the work that we proved with Back on Track to be successful, of getting them education, getting them job training, helping them get back on their feet in terms of their relationship with their family. And when we did that work in San Francisco, we reduced the recidivism rate for a specific population, the 18 through 24-year-old population of low-level offenders. We reduced the recidivism rate from 54% to less than 10%. We did the work of focusing on the fact that we cannot treat criminal justice policy the same way we treat a criminal case. Now, what do I mean by that? So again, I'm a career prosecutor. When I was presented with a file that was a case, I was tough. It was me in that case. And there was going to be serious consequence and accountability for that crime. It's a very different matter, however, when you're talking about the crime problem. Then we should be guided not by the appropriate emotional response and outrage or moral outrage we may have about a particular case. We should instead be guided by everything the private sector has figured out quite well. What is the return on our investment? Are we getting what we bargained for? And I would suggest in California, when recently we have had for decades actually, a recidivism rate of 70%, 67%, which is 67% of offenders upon 3 years of their release reoffend. If this were a business, we would shut it down. And so what we need to do is realize that we've got to reorganize in California and look at the return on our investment and treat criminal justice policy in a way that is not burdened by ideology or emotion, but instead is guided by evidence-based theories, guided by what we know we can do in terms of data-driven policy. So the California Department of Justice, through this new division, will focus on 3 specific areas. And those areas are going to include highlighting best practices from each of the counties and having it in one central place. You know, a lot of people have good intentions, but they just don't know how to actually pull it all together in terms of the approach, right? This is a whole new thing what we're doing in California. Some say it's a crisis. I think we in this room all know it's an incredible opportunity. So what we want to do is highlight best practices. So everyone doesn't have to come up with 58 ways to deal with things. We can have the models that are then capable of replication.